Evelyn Carter never imagined that walking into her boss's office with a coffee tray would end with a gun pointed at her chest and a man she thought she knew begging her not to scream. Adrian Voss wasn't just Chicago's most powerful CEO. He was something far darker, far more dangerous. And the moment she saw the truth in his eyes, everything she believed about her carefully controlled life shattered. One choice, 1 week, one irreversible step into a world where love and danger were the same thing. If you want to see how far Evelyn falls into Adrian's world, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city, so I can see how far this story reaches. The coffee was still hot when Evelyn Carter pushed open the frosted glass door to Adrian Voss's office. She'd timed it perfectly. 3:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before his daily debrief with the board. The tray balanced against her hip carried 2 cups, one black, no sugar, the way he took it every afternoon without fail. The second was hers, a ridiculous caramel monstrosity she'd never drink in front of him, but needed to justify the trip from the executive lounge. 8 months. That's how long she'd been Adrian Voss's executive assistant. 8 months of flawless performance, invisible efficiency, and a professional distance so carefully maintained it had become her armor. She knew his schedule better than he did. She knew he preferred emails to calls, that he hated small talk, that he never ate lunch at his desk even when buried in acquisition deals. She knew the exact tone of voice he used when he was about to fire someone. Calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. What she didn't know was why his office door was slightly ajar when it should have been locked. Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening on the tray's edge. Adrian's 3:30 had been a private call, blocked out in red on his calendar with no details. He never left the door open during red blocks. Never. She should have walked away. Should have set the coffee on her desk and waited for him to emerge in his usual composed state, all sharp lines and controlled energy. But something felt wrong. The silence coming from inside wasn't the focused quiet of a man on the phone. It was heavier, denser. She nudged the door open with her shoulder. The scene inside stopped her cold. Adrian stood with his back to her, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Chicago. His jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up past his elbows in a way she'd never seen. His shoulders were rigid, his head bowed slightly, one hand pressed flat against the glass. And he was talking. Not the measured, deliberate cadence she'd come to expect. This was raw, fractured, the voice of a man barely holding himself together. "I don't care what Marcus thinks he can negotiate," Adrian said, his tone sharp enough to cut. "If Petrov wants a war, he'll get one. But it doesn't happen on my streets, and it sure as hell doesn't touch my people." Evelyn's breath caught. The tray shifted in her hands, and one of the cups rattled against its saucer. Adrian spun around. For a single, suspended moment, they stared at each other. His face was a study in contrasts, the same devastatingly handsome features she saw every day, but stripped of their usual polish. His dark hair was disheveled, as though he'd been running his hands through it. His gray eyes, normally so controlled, burned with something she couldn't name. And his jaw was tight, the muscle there jumping like he was grinding his teeth hard enough to crack bone. Evelyn. Her name left his mouth like a curse, or a prayer. She couldn't tell which. She swallowed, forcing her voice to stay level. "Your coffee. I didn't realize you were still... How long have you been standing there?" "I just walked in. I didn't hear anything, I swear." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, like he could see straight through her carefully constructed professionalism to the panic racing underneath. The phone was still in his other hand, pressed against his thigh. She could hear a faint voice on the other end, tinny and impatient. "I'll call you back," Adrian said into the phone, his eyes never leaving hers. He ended the call with a decisive tap and set the phone on his desk with unsettling care. The silence that followed was suffocating. Evelyn forced herself to move, crossing the room on legs that felt like they might give out. She set the tray on the edge of his desk, her hand steadier than she expected. I'll leave you to it." "Don't." The word froze her in place. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze again. He hadn't moved from his position by the window, but something about the way he stood had changed. The raw edges were still there, but beneath them was something harder, deliberate. "Close the door," he said. It wasn't a request. Evelyn's pulse hammered in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to pretend this moment never happened, to go back to the safe, predictable rhythm of their working relationship. But her hand moved anyway, reaching back to push the door shut with a soft click. The air in the room shifted, thickened. Adrian exhaled slowly, dragging a hand through his hair. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge, but none of its weight. You heard what I said. I didn't mean to. That's not what I asked. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them with the kind of controlled precision that reminded her exactly who he was. Adrian Voss didn't do anything by accident. Not the way he walked, not the way he spoke, and certainly not the way he looked at her now, like he was deciding whether she was a problem or a solution. Evelyn lifted her chin, refusing to back down even though her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. I heard you mention someone named Petrov, and something about a war. And what do you think that means? I think, she said carefully, that it's none of my business. Adrian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Smart answer, but not entirely accurate. He moved past her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive that she'd never been able to place. He picked up the coffee she'd brought, taking a slow sip before setting it back down. His movements were calm now, almost casual, but the tension radiating off him was anything but. You've worked for me for 8 months, he said, his back still to her. In that time, you've never missed a deadline, never asked unnecessary questions, never pushed when I told you to let something go. He turned to face her. Why is that? Evelyn blinked. Because that's my job. No, your job is to manage my schedule and handle correspondence. What you've done is build a fortress of competence around yourself, so no one looks too closely at what's underneath. The observation landed like a punch. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words tangled in her throat. I recognize it, Adrian continued, his voice softer now. Because I do the same thing. The admission hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Evelyn didn't know what to say, didn't know what this moment was or where it was leading. All she knew was that the man standing in front of her wasn't the controlled, untouchable CEO she'd spent 8 months working for. This was someone else, someone rawer, someone who looked at her like she wasn't just another employee to be managed, but a person who might actually understand. And that terrified her more than anything she'd overheard. You're going to ask me to leave, she said quietly. Aren't you? Adrian's expression flickered. For just a second, something like regret crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of control. I'm going to give you a choice. What kind of choice? You can walk out of this office right now. Forget what you heard. Go back to your desk and pretend this conversation never happened. I'll make sure your severance is generous. Glowing references. Whatever you need to land somewhere better. Or, he said, his voice dropping to something darker, something that made the air between them crackle. You stay, and I tell you the truth. Evelyn's breath hitched. The truth about what? About who I really am. The words settled over her like a shroud. She should have taken the out, should have thanked him for the offer, and walked away with her dignity and her safety intact. But something in the way he looked at her, like he was daring her to be brave enough to see him, made her stay rooted to the spot. Why would you do that? She asked. Adrian stepped closer again, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. Because I'm tired of pretending, and because you're the first person in a long time who's made me think I might not have to. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This was insane. This was reckless. This was everything she'd spent her entire adult life avoiding. Messy, dangerous, unpredictable. But when she opened her mouth, the word that came out wasn't no. Tell me, she whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened. He reached past her, so close she could feel the heat radiating off his body, and locked the office door with a quiet click. Then he turned back to her, and the mask finally fell away. My name is Adrian Voss, he said, his voice steady and unflinching. I'm the CEO of Voss Industries. That part you already know. What you don't know is that everything I've built, the company, the reputation, the fortune, it's not the whole picture, it's not even half. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. What are you saying? I'm saying that Voss Industries is legitimate, but it's also a cover for the parts of my life that aren't. I don't understand. Yes, you do. Adrian's gaze held hers, unflinching. You heard me on the phone. You heard me talk about territory and wars and people I need to protect. You're smart enough to fill in the rest. The realization crashed over her like ice water. Her knees went weak, and she had to lock them to stay upright. You're telling me you're the head of the largest criminal network in the Midwest, Adrian finished for her. Money laundering, arms deals, territory disputes with people who don't negotiate, they eliminate. That's the world I live in, Evelyn. That's who I am. She stared at him, her mind racing. This couldn't be real. Adrian Voss was polished, controlled, the kind of man who donated to children's hospitals and sat on the boards of art museums. He wasn't, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. Why are you telling me this? She demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. You could have just let me walk away. Why drag me into this? Because you were already in it the moment you walked through that door. That's not an answer. Then how about this? Adrian's voice softened, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something vulnerable flash across his face. Because I don't want to lie to you anymore. And because if I'm going to give you a real choice, you need to know what you're choosing. Evelyn's hands were shaking. She curled them into fists at her sides, trying to ground herself. This is insane. You're insane. Probably. I should leave. Right now. I should walk out of here and never look back. You should, Adrian agreed. But you won't. You don't know that. Don't I? The challenge in his voice made her chest tighten. Because he was right. She could feel it in the way her feet stayed planted, in the way her eyes refused to leave his. She should have been terrified. Should have been running for the door. But instead, all she felt was a pull so strong it bordered on gravity. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian took a step closer, and this time she didn't move away. 1 week, he said. Give me 1 week. Let me show you who I really am. Not the version I show the board or the press or anyone else, the real version. And then what? And then you decide. If you want to walk away after that, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll make sure no one ever connects you to me. But if you stay, he paused, his jaw tightening. If you stay, Evelyn, there's no going back. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. This was a line she couldn't uncross. She knew that. But the man standing in front of her, stripped of all his defenses, looking at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the ground. She'd never felt more seen in her life. 1 week, she heard herself say. Adrian's expression shifted, something fierce and almost desperate flickering in his eyes. You're sure? No, she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure about any of this, but she nodded anyway. I'm sure. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adrian reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek before he seemed to think better of it and let it drop. We'll start tonight. I'll send a car for you at 7. Wear something comfortable. Where are we going? Somewhere you can see the truth. He stepped back, putting distance between them again, and the mask started to slide back into place. But it didn't fit quite the same way anymore. And Evelyn? Yeah? Thank you. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Then she turned and walked out of the office, her legs somehow carrying her back to her desk, even though her entire world had just tilted off its axis. As the door closed behind her, she pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. 1 week. What the hell had she just agreed to? The black car that pulled up outside Evelyn's apartment building at exactly 7 p.m. was not the kind of vehicle she'd expected. No sleek town car with tinted windows. Instead, it was a matte black SUV with reinforced plating she could spot even from the 3rd floor. The kind of car that screamed security louder than any corporate logo ever could. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans, a simple black sweater, and boots sturdy enough to run in if she needed to. The thought had made her laugh. A short, slightly hysterical sound that echoed in her empty apartment. What was she doing? The knock on her door came before she could spiral further. She grabbed her jacket and purse, checked her reflection one last time, and opened the door. The man standing in the hallway was not Adrian. He was built like a wall, easily 6'4", broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that came from years of training. His dark suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable. but his eyes tracked her movements with the precision of someone who'd been taught to assess threats before they materialized. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm Marcus. Mr. Voss sent me to escort you." Marcus. The name from Adrian's phone call. Evelyn forced herself to breathe normally. "He didn't mention you'd be picking me up." "He didn't mention a lot of things, I'm guessing." There was the barest hint of amusement in Marcus's tone. "Shall we?" She locked her door and followed him down the stairs, acutely aware of the way he positioned himself slightly ahead and to her left, between her and any potential threat. It was both comforting and deeply unnerving. The SUV's interior was just as intimidating as its exterior. Leather seats, climate control, and enough technology embedded in the dashboard to run a small military operation. Marcus held the door for her, waited until she was settled, then climbed into the driver's seat. They pulled into traffic without a word. Evelyn watched the city slide past her window, the familiar streets of her neighborhood giving way to the high-rises of downtown, then further toward the industrial district she rarely ventured into. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. Finally, she broke it. "How long have you worked for Adrian?" Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. 15 years. That's a long time." "It is. You must be close." "Close enough?" Evelyn waited, but Marcus didn't elaborate. She tried a different angle. "He told me the truth today, about what he does." "I know. Did he tell you that?" "Didn't have to." Marcus took a left turn heading toward the river. "You're still here. That says enough." "Maybe I'm just curious." "Curiosity's a dangerous thing in our world, Miss Carter." "Your world," she corrected. "I'm not part of it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "You are now." The words settled over her like a weight. She wanted to argue, to insist that 1 week didn't make her complicit in whatever Adrian was involved in. But the look in Marcus's eyes when he glanced at her again told her he'd heard that argument before, and it never ended well. They pulled up to a building she didn't recognize, an old warehouse by the look of it, with high windows and rusted fire escapes clinging to its brick facade. But the security system was state-of-the-art, and the reinforced door Marcus led her to was anything but abandoned. He keyed in a code, pressed his thumb to a scanner, and pushed the door open. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. The main floor was a study in controlled chaos. Men and women moved with purpose, their conversations clipped and efficient. Screens lined one wall displaying what looked like surveillance feeds from across the city. A table in the center was covered in maps, some marked with colored pins, others with handwritten notes in a language Evelyn didn't recognize. And standing in the middle of it all, his jacket discarded and his sleeves rolled up just like they'd been in his office, was Adrian. He was talking to a woman with short-cropped hair and a scar running down her left cheek. She nodded at whatever he was saying, then turned and barked orders to 2 men standing near the screens. They moved immediately. Adrian looked up and saw her. The shift in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. The hard edges softened, the focus narrowed. He said something to the scarred woman, who glanced at Evelyn with open curiosity before walking away. Then Adrian crossed the room, his stride confident and unhurried, and stopped in front of her. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me much choice. I gave you every choice." Evelyn met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Then let's say I'm calling your bluff." Adrian's mouth curved into a slow, genuine smile. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. "Good. Follow me." "Follow?" He led her through the warehouse, past the organized chaos of the main floor, down a hallway lined with doors she didn't dare ask about. At the end of the hall, he pushed open a door that led to a smaller room. An office, she realized, though it was nothing like the sterile professionalism of his corporate space. This room was lived in. A desk covered in paperwork, a worn leather couch against one wall, bookshelves packed with everything from military strategy to classic literature. And on the wall behind the desk, a corkboard covered in photos. Evelyn stepped closer, studying them. Some were surveillance shots, grainy, distant. Others were candid, almost intimate. A group of people laughing around a table. Marcus, younger and less scarred, standing next to a man she didn't recognize. And in the center, a photo of Adrian with a woman who had the same sharp cheekbones and gray eyes. "My sister," Adrian said quietly from behind her. "Elena." Evelyn turned to look at him. "Where is she now?" "Dead. The word was flat, final, and underneath it, a grief so deep she could feel it radiating off him. "I'm sorry," she said, because she didn't know what else to say. Adrian nodded, his jaw tight. "She's why I do this, why I built all of it. She was 23 when she died, got caught in the crossfire of a territory dispute I didn't even know was happening. I was too busy building the company, making a name for myself in the legitimate world. I thought that would be enough to protect her. I was wrong." Evelyn's chest ached. "Adrian, I don't want your pity," he said, his voice harder now. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't a game. It's not some romanticized version of danger. People die, Evelyn. People I care about. And if you stay, you become one of those people." She swallowed hard. "And if I leave? Then you go back to your normal life, and I make sure no one ever knows you were here." It was the same offer he'd made in his office, the same out. But standing here in this room filled with pieces of his life he'd never shown anyone, Evelyn realized something. She didn't want to leave. "Show me the rest," she said. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." What? The next 3 hours were a crash course in Adrian's world. He walked her through the operation with the same calm precision he used in board meetings, explaining the structure, the players, the rules that governed everything. The warehouse wasn't just a base, it was a nerve center coordinating shipments, monitoring rival factions, managing the intricate web of alliances and enmities that kept his empire running. Evelyn met the scarred woman, whose name was Irina, and who served as Adrian's second-in-command. She met a tech specialist named Dev, who looked barely old enough to drink but could hack into any system in the city. She met enforcers and strategists and people whose roles Adrian didn't elaborate on. And through it all, she watched Adrian. He was different here. Sharper, more dangerous, but also more alive. The control he wore like armor in the corporate world was still there, but it wasn't suffocating him. This was where he belonged. By the time they returned to his office, Evelyn's head was spinning. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle on his desk and handed her one. "Questions?" She took a sip, letting the burn steady her. "About 1,000. Start with 1. "Why me?" Adrian leaned against the edge of his desk, the glass cradled in one hand. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." "Because you're the first person in 8 months who didn't look at me like I was untouchable. You looked at me like I was human." The confession landed between them, raw and unguarded. Evelyn set her glass down, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what you want me to say to that." "I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to stay long enough to figure out if this..." He gestured vaguely at the room, at himself. "If this is something you can live with." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the question underneath the words, "Can you see all of me and not run?" And the answer, terrifying and undeniable, was already forming in her chest. "1 week," she said again. Adrian's eyes darkened with something that looked like relief. 1 week. The week started with breakfast at a diner Evelyn had never noticed before, tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered laundromat on the south side. The kind of place where the coffee was terrible and the eggs were always overcooked, but nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Adrian was already there when Marcus dropped her off, sitting in a booth near the back with a clear view of both exits. He'd traded his tailored suits for dark jeans and a black Henley that made him look less like a CEO and more like exactly what he was. She slid into the seat across from him, still processing the fact that she'd agreed to this, that she'd woken up in her own bed, gone through her normal morning routine, and then willingly gotten into a car that brought her here. "You look tired," Adrian said, pushing a cup of coffee toward her. "I didn't sleep much." "Second thoughts?" "About 100 of them." She took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. "This is awful." "I know, but it's consistent." He gestured around the diner. "This place has been here 30 years. Same owner, same menu, same terrible coffee. That kind of reliability is rare." Evelyn studied him over the rim of her cup. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the slight crookedness of his nose like it had been broken and not set quite right. Details she'd never noticed in the polished confines of his corporate office. "Is this what the week looks like?" she asked. "Bad diners and philosophy about coffee?" Adrian's mouth quirked. "Not exactly. Today you meet the people who keep my world running. The ones who aren't at the warehouse. More introductions? More context. He leaned back, his arm draped along the top of the booth. You saw the operation last night. Now you need to understand the ecosystem, the alliances, the pressure points, the reasons I make the choices I do. A waitress appeared, ancient and uninterested, and took their order without writing anything down. After she shuffled away, Evelyn leaned forward. Tell me about Petrov. Adrian's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. You don't miss much, do you? You mentioned him on the phone, and again last night when you were talking to Irina. He's important. He's a problem. Adrian's fingers drummed once against the table, then stilled. Alexei Petrov runs the Russian pipeline in Chicago. Weapons, mostly, but he's been expanding into my territory. Testing boundaries. And I can't let that stand. But going to war with Petrov means collateral damage I'm not willing to accept. So I'm trying diplomacy first. Does diplomacy usually work in your world? Almost never. But I have to try. The food arrived. Eggs that were indeed overcooked, toast that was burnt on one side, bacon that had gone cold. Evelyn picked at it while Adrian ate with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste time on things like enjoying meals. Where are we going after this? She asked. The docks. There's a shipment coming in I need to oversee. Evelyn's fork paused halfway to her mouth. A shipment of what? Nothing that'll get you arrested just for being there, Adrian said with a slight smile. Medical supplies, actually. Legitimate business. One of my pharmaceutical distributors. You have legitimate businesses? Several. They're useful for moving money and maintaining appearances. Plus, he shrugged. Not everything I do is illegal, just most of it. The casual admission should have shocked her, should have sent her running. Instead, Evelyn found herself almost fascinated by the pragmatism of it. Adrian didn't romanticize what he did, didn't make excuses or try to paint himself as some kind of Robin Hood figure. He simply existed in a world with different rules and played the game better than anyone else. They finished eating in relative silence. Then Marcus drove them east toward the lakefront. The docks were exactly as bleak as Evelyn expected. Concrete and rust, and the smell of dead fish mixed with diesel fuel. But the warehouse they pulled up to was clean, efficient, with workers moving in coordinated patterns that spoke of serious organization. Adrian walked through the space like he owned it, because he did. People nodded as he passed, respectful but not obsequious. He stopped to talk to a foreman, asked about a delayed truck, listened to an explanation about traffic on the interstate with the same focus he gave to million-dollar contracts. Evelyn hung back with Marcus, watching. He's different here too, she said quietly. Marcus grunted in agreement. He's different everywhere. That's the problem. What do you mean? Most people in this life, they pick a version of themselves and stick with it. Makes things simpler. But Adrian, Marcus shook his head. He's got too many pieces. CEO, crime boss, brother, friend. He tries to be all of them at once and it tears him apart. Then why does he do it? Because he doesn't know how to be anything else. The observation sat heavy in Evelyn's chest. She watched Adrian shake the foreman's hand, make a joke that got a genuine laugh, then turn and walk back toward them, with his expression already shifting back to something harder. Everything's on schedule, he said. We're done here. They drove north next, into a neighborhood Evelyn recognized from the news. High crime rates, failing schools, buildings that should have been condemned years ago. Marcus parked outside a community center that looked only slightly less dilapidated than its surroundings. Adrian got out without explanation, and Evelyn followed. Inside, the center was alive. Kids playing basketball in a gym that had seen better days. Teenagers clustered around computers in a makeshift lab. A cooking class in progress in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and fresh bread. A woman in her 50s spotted Adrian and broke into a wide smile. Look who finally decided to show up. Missed me, Rosa? Adrian's whole demeanor shifted, warmth bleeding into his voice, like a cavity misses a dentist. But Rosa hugged him anyway, fierce and quick. Then she turned her sharp gaze on Evelyn. And who's this? Evelyn Carter. She works with me. Works with or works for? Does it matter? Rosa snorted. I suppose not. Come on, I'll show you what we did with that donation. They followed her through the center while she rattled off improvements. New computers, updated kitchen equipment, a renovated roof that no longer leaked every time it rained. Adrian listened, asked questions, made notes on his phone about additional funding for a literacy program. It was only when they were leaving that Evelyn realized what she'd just witnessed. "You fund this place." "I fund several places like this," Adrian said, climbing back into the SUV. "Community centers, youth programs, a few scholarship funds. Irina manages the logistics." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because Elena used to volunteer at a center like that, before she died. She believed people deserved a chance, even when the world had written them off." His jaw tightened. "I can't bring her back, but I can make sure her work doesn't die with her." Evelyn's throat constricted. This wasn't the sanitized philanthropy of corporate donations and tax write-offs. This was personal, raw, a man trying to atone for a loss he'd never stopped feeling. "She would have liked you," Adrian added quietly. "Elena. She had a thing for people who didn't take anyone's bullshit." "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is." The rest of the day blurred together. More stops, more introductions, more pieces of Adrian's fractured world clicking into place. A bar where he met with an alderman who owed him favors. A garage where cars were stripped and rebuilt without any attention to legal niceties. A high-rise apartment where an elderly woman fed them pierogi and told embarrassing stories about Adrian as a teenager. By the time Marcus dropped Evelyn back at her building, the sun was setting and her head was spinning. "Same time tomorrow?" Adrian asked through the open car window. "What's tomorrow?" "You'll see." He drove away before she could argue. Evelyn climbed the stairs to her apartment, locked the door behind her, and collapsed on her couch. Her phone had 17 missed calls from her mother and a text from her best friend asking if she was still alive. She ignored both and stared at the ceiling. 1 day down, 6 to go, and she still had no idea what she was doing. Chessie. The second day started with a lie. Evelyn told her mother she was working late on a special project, told her friend she'd been swamped with a new client, told herself this was just research, just curiosity, just a week of her life she'd look back on someday as proof she'd taken a risk. The lie felt easier than it should have. Marcus picked her up again, but this time Adrian was in the back seat. He looked different. Sharper suit, hair slicked back, the corporate mask firmly in place. They were going to Voss Industries, he explained. He had meetings, and she was coming with him. "Why?" Evelyn asked as they pulled into the underground parking garage. "Because you need to see both sides. If you're going to understand who I am, you need to see how seamlessly they coexist." The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. Evelyn had been here hundreds of times, but today it felt different, like she was seeing it through new eyes. The expensive art on the walls, the hushed efficiency of the assistants, the way everyone deferred to Adrian without him saying a word. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it 2 days ago, a stack of files, a half-empty coffee cup, her keyboard with the B key that stuck. Adrian paused beside it. "You don't have to sit here if you don't want to. You can use one of the conference rooms." "And do what?" "Whatever you want. Read, work, think." Evelyn sat down in her chair, the familiar creak grounding her. "I'll stay here." Adrian nodded and disappeared into his office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The morning passed in surreal normalcy. Emails arrived. Phone calls were routed. Evelyn handled them all on autopilot, her brain splitting focus between the mundane tasks and the knowledge of what Adrian really was. Around noon, the door to his office opened and a man Evelyn had never seen before emerged. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit that probably cost more than her rent. He barely glanced at her as he strode past, but the look Adrian shot her through the open door was pointed. She waited until the elevator doors closed. Then she stood and walked into Adrian's office without knocking. "Who was that?" Adrian leaned back in his chair, exhaustion flickering across his face before he schooled it away. "Senator Morrison. He's looking for campaign contributions." "And you're giving them to him?" "I'm considering it. He's useful." "Useful how?" "He chairs the committee that oversees financial regulations in Illinois. Having him in my pocket means I can move money more freely." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You're bribing a senator." "I'm making a campaign donation. What he does with the goodwill is his choice." "That's a hell of a rationalization." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, Morrison was going to take money from someone. At least when he takes it from me, I know it's going toward programs that actually help people instead of lining some defense contractors' pockets. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary. He stood, rounding the desk to face her. You want to judge me for this? Fine, but don't pretend the system isn't already corrupt. I'm just better at playing the game. Evelyn held his gaze, refusing to back down. And what happens when the game catches up with you? Then I lose, and everyone who depends on me loses with me. Adrian's voice dropped, raw honesty bleeding through. That's why I can't afford mistakes, Evelyn. That's why every move has to be calculated, because it's not just my life on the line. The weight of it settled over her. The impossible balancing act he performed every single day, ruthless enough to survive, careful enough to protect the people in his orbit. One wrong step and the whole thing collapsed. I'm not judging you, she said quietly. I'm trying to understand you. Something in Adrian's expression softened. Then you're doing better than most. A knock on the door interrupted them. Adrian's assistant, an efficient woman named Diane, who Evelyn had worked alongside for months, poked her head in. Mr. Voss, your 2:00 is here. Thank you, Diane. Give me 5 minutes. The door closed again. Adrian turned back to Evelyn, and for just a moment she saw the exhaustion he usually kept hidden, the toll of living 2 lives, the loneliness of never being fully honest with anyone, except now he was being honest with her. Go home early today, Adrian said. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Why? Because tomorrow you meet Petrov. The words dropped like a stone. Evelyn's pulse kicked up. What? He requested a meeting, neutral ground. I'm bringing you. Adrian, that's insane. That's non-negotiable. His voice was firm now, the CEO tone she recognized. If you want to understand my world, you need to see what happens when diplomacy fails. And with Petrov, it always fails. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't about proving a point. This was about showing her the stakes. Fine, she said, but you're explaining the plan before we walk in. Adrian's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Deal. The 3rd day brought rain, cold, relentless, the kind that soaked through everything and left the city gray and miserable. Evelyn dressed carefully, choosing dark slacks and a sweater that wouldn't draw attention. Marcus picked her up at noon, and Adrian was already in the car, his focus somewhere distant. Where's the meeting? She asked as they pulled into traffic. A restaurant downtown. Petrov chose it. Is that normal? No. Which means he's either being generous or setting a trap. Adrian glanced at her. My money's on the latter. Marcus drove them to an upscale Italian place Evelyn recognized from reviews. White tablecloths, wine lists thicker than most novels. The kind of establishment where reservations were made months in advance. Adrian walked in like he owned it, and maybe he did. The maitre d' led them to a private room in the back without a word. Alexei Petrov was already seated. He was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe early 40s, with pale blonde hair and eyes the color of ice. His suit was impeccable, his posture relaxed, but there was something predatory in the way he watched them enter, like a snake deciding whether to strike. 2 men flanked him, both built like Marcus, but meaner. Neither smiled. Adrian, Petrov said in lightly accented English, punctual as always. Alexei. Adrian took the seat across from him, and Evelyn sat beside him, acutely aware of the way everyone's attention shifted to her. And who is this? Petrov's gaze raked over her, assessing. Evelyn Carter. She's with me. I can see that. Petrov smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. You usually don't bring guests to our meetings. I'm making an exception. How sentimental. The waiter appeared, took drink orders, disappeared again. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Evelyn forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her hands still in her lap, to project a calm she absolutely did not feel. I assume you didn't ask for this meeting just to admire my company, Adrian said finally. Petrov leaned back in his chair. I wanted to discuss our recent misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. You moved shipments through my territory without clearance. That's a violation. Your territory? Petrov's smile sharpened. That's a strong claim for someone whose hold is slipping. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Evelyn felt the temperature in the room drop. If you have something to say, Alexei, say it. Very well. Petrov steepled his fingers. I'm offering you a partnership. You control distribution. I control supply. We split the profit 60-40. 60 in whose favor? Mine, of course. Not interested. Petrov's eyes hardened. You should reconsider. The alternative is less pleasant. The alternative is you trying to take my territory by force and losing half your men in the process. Adrian's voice was calm, almost bored. We've danced this dance before, Alexei. You push. I push back. No one wins. So how about we skip to the part where you accept that Chicago is mine and find somewhere else to expand? And if I don't, then we see how committed you really are. The tension ratcheted up another notch. One of Petrov's men shifted, his hand moving toward his jacket. Marcus, standing behind Adrian, went still in the way that preceded violence. Then Petrov laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound, but it broke the standoff. You have balls, Voss, I'll give you that. I have a functioning brain. The balls are just a bonus. Perhaps. Petrov glanced at Evelyn again, something calculating in his expression. Tell me, Miss Carter, what do you think of all this? Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to stay quiet, to not draw attention. But Adrian had brought her here for a reason. And if she showed weakness now, Petrov would exploit it. I think, she said carefully, that business negotiations work better when both parties respect boundaries. Petrov's eyebrows rose. Diplomatic, how refreshing. He turned back to Adrian. I like her. Where did you find her? That's none of your concern. Everything about you is my concern, Adrian. You know that. The waiter returned with their drinks, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Mutual acquaintances, recent news, the kind of small talk that felt obscene given what had just transpired. Evelyn barely tasted the wine she sipped, her entire focus on reading the room. When the meal finally ended, Petrov stood first. Think about my offer, he said to Adrian. You have 1 week. I don't need a week to tell you no. Humor me anyway. Petrov and his men left without another word. The moment the door closed behind them, Adrian's shoulders dropped fractionally. That went well, Marcus said dryly. Define well. No one got shot. Adrian drained the rest of his whiskey. Yet, Evelyn found her voice. He's not going to let this go, is he? No. Adrian looked at her, and the exhaustion was back, heavier now. He's going to push until I have no choice but to push back. And when that happens, people are going to die. Can't you just… what? Walk away? Cede territory? Let him think weakness is rewarded? Adrian shook his head. This world doesn't work that way, Evelyn. The moment you show vulnerability, someone exploits it. Always. She wanted to argue, wanted to find some solution he hadn't thought of, but the bleak certainty in his eyes told her there wasn't one. They left the restaurant in silence. The rain had intensified, turning the streets into rivers of gray. Marcus drove them back to the warehouse, and Evelyn followed Adrian inside without being asked. Irina was waiting, her expression grim. We have a problem. What now? Petrov's men hit one of our shipments an hour ago. Took everything. Adrian went very still. Casualties? 2 of ours injured. Nothing fatal, but it's a message. Yeah, I got it. He turned and walked toward his office, his stride controlled but radiating fury. Evelyn hesitated, then followed. Inside, Adrian paced like a caged animal, his hands flexing and releasing. He did it while we were at lunch, he said, more to himself than to her. Wanted me to know he could. What are you going to do? Adrian stopped pacing, looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something close to desperation in his eyes. What I always do. Protect my people and hope I don't lose myself in the process. Evelyn crossed the space between them without thinking, stopped close enough to see the storm raging behind his carefully controlled exterior. You don't have to do this alone, she said quietly. Yes, I do. That's the job. Then screw the job. Adrian's eyes widened fractionally. Then, slowly, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, his touch gentle despite the violence she knew those hands were capable of. You're in way over your head, he murmured. I know. You should run. I know that too. Then why are you still here? Evelyn met his gaze, steady and sure. Because you asked me to be. Something cracked in Adrian's expression. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers, and for a moment they just breathed together. Two people standing in the eye of a storm, holding on. Then his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. Adrian stepped back, all business again. I need to handle this. Marcus will take you home. Adrian? Please, Evelyn, not tonight. She wanted to fight, wanted to stay, but the exhaustion in his voice was enough to make her nod. Marcus drove her home in silence. When she finally collapsed into bed, sleep wouldn't come. All she could see was Adrian's face, the weight he carried, the loneliness, the impossible choices, and somewhere in the darkness, she realized she wasn't counting down the days until this ended anymore. She was dreading them. The fourth morning started with gunfire. Evelyn was pouring coffee when her phone rang, Adrian's name flashing on the screen. She answered before the second ring, already knowing something was wrong. Don't leave your apartment. His voice was clipped, urgent in a way she'd never heard before. Marcus is 2 minutes out. Stay away from the windows. Adrian, what? The line went dead. Evelyn's hands shook as she set the phone down. She backed away from her kitchen window, her heart hammering against her ribs. 2 minutes felt like an eternity. She grabbed her jacket, her keys, her phone, trying to think through the panic flooding her system. When the knock finally came, she nearly jumped out of her skin. Marcus didn't wait for her to invite him in. He pushed through the door, his eyes scanning the apartment with professional efficiency. We need to move. Now. What happened? Petrov happened. Come on. He led her down the back stairs, avoiding the main entrance entirely. The SUV was idling in the alley, engine running. Marcus practically shoved her into the back seat before climbing behind the wheel and pulling out fast enough to make the tires squeal. Where's Adrian? Evelyn demanded. Handling it. That's not an answer. Marcus's jaw tightened. Petrov hit 3 of our locations overnight, burned 1 to the ground. Adrian's coordinating the response. Is anyone hurt? 4 in the hospital. Could have been worse. Evelyn's stomach twisted. This was real. Not some abstract concept of danger, but actual violence with actual consequences. People were hurt because Petrov was pushing, and Adrian was pushing back, and she was somehow caught in the middle of it all. Marcus drove them to the warehouse, taking a route that doubled back on itself twice. Inside, the organized chaos from her first visit had transformed into something sharper. People moved with purpose. Their conversations clipped and tense. Weapons were being checked. Maps updated. Plans made. Adrian stood in the center of it all, his sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. When he saw Evelyn, something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or regret. He crossed to her in 3 long strides. You're okay. You said to stay inside. I stayed inside. I know, I just... He exhaled sharply. I needed to see for myself. Irina appeared at Adrian's elbow, her expression grim. We've got confirmation. Petrov's claiming responsibility. He sent a message. What kind of message? The kind written in gasoline and matches. Irina handed him a tablet. He's not hiding anymore. He wants everyone to know he's coming for you. Adrian's face went cold. He studied the screen for a long moment, then handed it back. Double security on all facilities. Pull everyone back to defensive positions. And get me a location on Petrov. I want to know where he sleeps. Already working on it. Irina walked away, barking orders into her phone. Adrian turned back to Evelyn, and the mask slipped just enough for her to see the exhaustion underneath. I need to ask you something, he said quietly. Okay. Do you trust me? The question caught her off guard. What kind of question is that? A necessary one. Because what happens next, it's going to get ugly. And I need to know if you trust me to keep you safe. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, saw the man who'd shown her his world without flinching, who'd been honest when it would have been easier to lie, who was standing in the middle of a war zone and still found the time to make sure she was okay. Yes, she said. I trust you. Something in Adrian's shoulders relaxed. Good. Because you're staying here until this is over. For how long? As long as it takes. Before Evelyn could argue, Marcus reappeared. We've got movement. 2 of Petrov's cars heading toward the south side. Adrian's entire demeanor shifted. How many men? At least 6, maybe more. Where are they going? Looks like they're targeting the community center. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Rosa's community center, the place with the kids and the computers and the woman who hugged Adrian like family. Adrian went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. Get everyone there out, now, and send our people to intercept. Adrian, Marcus started. I don't care what it takes. Petrov doesn't get to put those kids in danger. Move. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Adrian turned to Evelyn, and the fury in his eyes was barely contained. I need to go. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to make that decision for me. The hell I don't. This is exactly the kind of situation I was trying to keep you out of. Evelyn stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated. And I'm telling you, I'm not sitting here while you run into gunfire. So either I come with you or I follow in a cab. Your choice. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. A short, sharp sound that held no humor. You're going to get yourself killed. Not if you keep me alive. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. But he didn't argue further, just grabbed a Kevlar vest from a nearby table and shoved it at her. Put this on, and stay behind me, always. Evelyn pulled the vest over her sweater, the weight of it strange and heavy. Adrian adjusted the straps with quick, efficient movements, his hands steady despite the urgency radiating off him. If I tell you to run, he said, his face inches from hers, you run, no questions. No hesitation. Understood? Understood. I mean it, Evelyn. I know. He held her gaze for another beat, then turned and strode toward the exit. Evelyn followed, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The drive to the south side was the longest 15 minutes of her life. Marcus drove with controlled aggression, weaving through traffic while Adrian coordinated on his phone. 2 other SUVs flanked them, filled with men Evelyn recognized from the warehouse, all of them armed, all of them focused. When they pulled up to the community center, Rosa was already outside, ushering kids into a school bus that looked like it had been manufactured sometime in the previous century. She spotted Adrian and waved him over. Your people said we needed to evacuate, she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about. Just get everyone out of here. Go to the church on Madison. You'll be safe there. Adrian, please, Rosa, trust me. She searched his face, then nodded. You better not get yourself killed. Elena would haunt me if I let that happen. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. I'll do my best. Rosa climbed onto the bus, and it pulled away with a belch of black smoke. The moment it turned the corner, Adrian's focus shifted back to the street. His men had already taken positions, some inside the center, others in the surrounding buildings. A perimeter forming. How long until Petrov's people get here? Adrian asked Marcus. 5 minutes? Maybe less? Then we're out of time, Adrian turned to Evelyn. There's a storage room in the back of the center. Reinforced door, you're going to wait there. Adrian, this is not negotiable. His voice was hard now, the CEO tone that brooked no argument. I can't do what I need to do if I'm worried about you catching a stray bullet. Evelyn wanted to fight, wanted to tell him she wasn't some damsel who needed protecting, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't about her pride. This was about his ability to function in a situation where hesitation got people killed. Okay, she said quietly. Relief flickered across his face. He led her inside, through the empty gym to a small room at the back. The door was indeed reinforced, the lock heavy-duty. Adrian handed her his phone. If something happens to me, call the first number in my contacts. Irina will get you out. Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not, but just in case. He started to leave, then turned back. In one fluid movement, he pulled her against him and kissed her, hard and desperate and entirely too brief. Stay alive, he murmured against her lips. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Evelyn sank onto a crate, her fingers trembling as they touched her mouth. She could still feel the pressure of his lips, the intensity of a man who didn't know if he'd survive the next hour. Outside, she heard voices, footsteps, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Then, chaos. The first shots were distant, muffled by the walls of the storage room. But as the firefight escalated, the sounds grew sharper, closer, the distinctive crack of pistols mixing with the heavier percussion of something automatic. Evelyn pressed herself against the back wall, her hands clamped over her ears even though it did nothing to block out the noise. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything but sit here and wait. Then the door to the storage room burst open. Evelyn's scream caught in her throat as a man stumbled inside. One of Adrian's. She recognized the face from the warehouse. Blood soaked his shoulder and his left arm hung useless at his side. "We need to move," he gasped. "They broke through the west side, too many of them." "Where's Adrian?" "Holding the line, but we can't—" He swayed, his face going pale. "We can't hold much longer." Evelyn caught him as his knees buckled, easing him down to the floor. She'd never dealt with a gunshot wound before, but she pressed her hands against his shoulder anyway, trying to slow the bleeding. "What's your name?" she asked, keeping her voice steady even though panic clawed at her throat. "Danny." "Okay, Danny, you're going to be fine. Just stay with me." He nodded, his breathing shallow. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence was somehow worse. Evelyn held her breath, straining to hear anything. Footsteps, voices, some indication of who had won. The door opened again, and this time it was Marcus. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt torn, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding freely. But he was alive. "We're clear," he said. Petrov's men retreated. "Adrian?" "He's fine. Pissed off, but fine." Marcus's gaze dropped to Danny. "Get him up. We've got medics waiting." Between the two of them, they got Danny outside. The community center looked like a war zone. Windows shattered, bullet holes peppering the walls, shell casings littering the ground. Two of Adrian's men were being loaded into a van, both conscious but clearly hurt. Another was being zipped into a body bag. Evelyn's stomach turned. Adrian stood near the street talking into his phone with clipped urgency. When he saw her, he ended the call and crossed the distance in seconds. "You okay?" He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine. Danny is getting medical attention." "You did good." Adrian's hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through him. "This is what I was trying to protect you from." "I know." "Do you?" His voice cracked. "Because one of my people just died, Evelyn. Petrov will keep coming until either he's dead or I am. And everyone close to me becomes a target." The reality of it settled over her like a weight. This wasn't some abstract danger anymore. This was real, visceral, the kind of violence that left bodies in its wake. "I want to go home," she said quietly. Something in Adrian's expression shuddered. "Marcus will take you." "That's not— I meant your home. The place you actually live, not the warehouse or the office. I want to see where you go when everything else falls apart." Adrian stared at her. "Why?" "Because we have 3 days left, and I need to know if this is something I can survive." He studied her for a long moment, searching for something. Then he nodded. "Okay, but fair warning, it's not what you're expecting." Marcus drove them north, away from the chaos, into a neighborhood of old brownstones and tree-lined streets. Adrian's building was understated, elegant in the way old money tended to be. They took the elevator to the top floor, and when Adrian unlocked the door, Evelyn stepped into a space that was nothing like she'd imagined. It was warm, lived in. Books stacked on tables, a worn leather couch, framed photos on the walls. Not the sterile showpiece she'd expected, but a home. Adrian shrugged out of his jacket, tossing it over a chair. "Make yourself comfortable. I need to make some calls." He disappeared into another room, his voice carrying back in muffled fragments. Evelyn wandered through the space, taking in the details. A collection of vinyl records, a chess set mid-game, and on the mantel, a photo of Adrian and Elena, both younger and smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. She was still staring at it when Adrian returned. "That was taken 3 months before she died," he said quietly. "We'd gone to the lake. She loved the water." "She looks happy." She was, right up until she wasn't. Adrian crossed to the window, looking out at the city lights. "I've been thinking about your question, the one you asked in the storage room." "Which one? Whether this is something you can survive." He turned to face her. The answer is, I don't know. I can protect you from Petrov, from anyone who tries to hurt you because of me, but I can't protect you from what this life does to people. The constant fear, the knowledge that any moment could be your last. That takes a toll that no amount of security can prevent. Evelyn moved to stand beside him. And you live with that every day. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Adrian. Do they? His laugh was bitter. I built this empire to protect the people Elena cared about, to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else under my watch. If I walk away now, it all collapses. The community centers lose funding. The families who depend on my protection become targets. Everything she believed in dies with me. That's not fair to you. Fear doesn't enter into it. Evelyn turned to look at him fully. In the soft light of his apartment, stripped of all the armor he wore in the outside world, Adrian looked younger, vulnerable, like a man carrying the weight of too many ghosts. What if you didn't have to do it alone? She asked. Adrian's eyes darkened. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe the reason you're drowning is because you won't let anyone help you carry the weight. And you think you can? I think I'm still here. After everything you've shown me, all the ugliness and danger and impossible choices, I'm still here. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Probably both. He kissed her then, soft and searching, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. Evelyn's hands found his shirt, fisting in the fabric as she kissed him back with equal intensity. This wasn't the desperate collision from earlier. This was slower, deeper. A promise neither of them was ready to voice. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, please. Okay. He led her to the bedroom, and they collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed, exhaustion finally catching up. Adrian pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. 3 days, he murmured into her hair. 3 days, Evelyn echoed. But as sleep claimed her, she realized she wasn't counting down anymore. She was counting up, measuring how much deeper she'd fallen, how much harder it would be to walk away, if she even could. When Evelyn woke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows and Adrian was gone. Panic spiked through her before she heard the sound of his voice drifting from another room. On the phone again, always on the phone. She found him in the kitchen, shirtless and wearing sweatpants, coffee brewing while he paced and talked. When he saw her, his expression softened. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then set it down. Morning. Morning. Evelyn accepted the coffee he poured, grateful for something to do with her hands. What's the situation? Petrov's gone quiet. Either he's regrouping or he's planning something bigger. Which do you think it is? The second one. Adrian leaned against the counter, his gaze steady on her. We need to talk about what happens next. Okay. The week is almost over. You've seen everything I promised to show you. The legitimate business, the criminal enterprise, the violence that comes with it. You've met my people. You've been shot at. He paused. You've earned the right to make an informed decision. Evelyn's heart constricted. You're asking me to choose. I'm asking you to be honest about what you can live with, what you're willing to risk. Adrian set his coffee down, his hands gripping the edge of the counter like he needed the anchor. Because if you stay, Evelyn, if you choose this, there's no halfway. You're either all in or you're out. And I need to know which it is. The weight of the question pressed down on her. This was the moment. The line she'd been approaching since she first walked into his office and heard him talk about wars and territory and things that shattered her carefully constructed world. Can I ask you something first? She said. Anything. Do you love me? Adrian's eyes widened fractionally. The question had caught him off guard, and for a moment he didn't answer. Then quietly, I'm trying not to. Why? Because loving you means putting you in danger. It means watching you become a target for everyone who wants to hurt me. It means living with the fear that one day I'll fail to protect you and you'll end up like Elena. Evelyn set her coffee down and crossed to him. And if I told you I'm willing to take that risk, then I'd say you're insane. Maybe. Or maybe I've spent my whole life playing it safe, building walls around myself so high that nothing could touch me. And maybe meeting you showed me that living behind those walls isn't really living at all. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. You deserve better than this. Better than me. I don't want better, I want you. The words hung between them, raw and irrevocable. Adrian searched her face like he was looking for any trace of doubt, any hesitation that would give him permission to let her go. He didn't find any. You're sure? His voice was rough. I'm terrified. But yes, I'm sure. Adrian kissed her then, deep and consuming, like he was trying to pour everything he couldn't say into the contact. Evelyn kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise you safety, or normalcy, or any of the things you should be able to expect. I know. But I can promise you honesty, loyalty, and that I will do everything in my power to keep you alive. That's all I'm asking for. Adrian pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers one more time. Then stay. Not just for the rest of the week. Stay. Evelyn's breath caught. This was it. The point of no return. The moment where her old life ended and something new, dangerous and terrifying and exhilarating began. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Something fierce and possessive flared in Adrian's eyes. He kissed her again, harder this time, his hands sliding down to her waist. Evelyn melted into him, into the heat and certainty of this choice she was making. They didn't make it back to the bedroom, didn't make it past the couch. And for the first time in 8 months, Evelyn felt completely, utterly alive. Later, tangled together in the afternoon light, Adrian traced lazy patterns on her skin. I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It's practical. He shifted to look at her properly. If you're staying, we need to make it official. In my world, appearances matter. People need to know you're untouchable. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you move in here, publicly. Let everyone see that you're with me. It's the best protection I can offer. Evelyn propped herself up on one elbow. You want me to move in with you? I want you safe. This is how I make that happen. And what do I tell people? My mother? My friends? The truth. That you're in a relationship with me. They don't need to know the rest. It should have felt too fast, too reckless. But lying there in Adrian's arms, the city humming beyond the windows, Evelyn realized she'd already made the leap. Everything else was just logistics. Okay, she said, but I'm bringing my books. All of them. Adrian smiled. A real smile. Warm and unguarded. I wouldn't expect anything less. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He grabbed it, his expression darkening as he read the message. Petrov wants another meeting. When? Tomorrow night. Says he has a proposition. Are you going to take it? I have to. Ignoring him now would be seen as weakness. Adrian sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. But this time you're staying here. No arguments. Evelyn wanted to push back, but the memory of yesterday's gunfire was still too fresh. Fine, but you're calling me the second it's over. Deal. They spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo, half normalcy, half preparation for war. Adrian made calls. Evelyn started mentally cataloging which of her belongings she'd need to pack. They ordered takeout and ate it on the couch while Adrian explained the finer points of his security protocols. It was domestic and surreal in equal measure. As night fell, Adrian pulled her close. Last chance to change your mind. I'm not changing my mind. Good. He kissed the top of her head. Because I don't think I could let you go now, even if I wanted to. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words settle over her. She'd made her choice. For better or worse, her life was tied to his now. And despite everything, the danger, the violence, the impossible odds, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray, heavy sky that promised rain but never delivered. Evelyn woke to an empty bed again, but this time she'd expected it. Adrian had warned her he'd be gone early. Meetings with his people before the sit-down with Petrov, contingency plans that needed to be set in motion. She found a note on the kitchen counter, his handwriting sharp and precise. Stay inside. Marcus is downstairs. I'll call you when it's done. Evelyn made coffee and tried not to think about what "it's done" might mean. Tried not to imagine Adrian walking into another restaurant, another negotiation that could end in violence. She'd chosen this, she reminded herself. Chosen him, and everything that came with it. Her phone rang around 10. Her mother. Evelyn stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Hi, Mom. Finally, I was starting to think you'd fallen off the planet." Her mother's voice carried that particular blend of concern and irritation that only parents could master. "You haven't called in over a week. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, just busy with work." Work. Her mother said it like she didn't quite believe it. "Evelyn, you sound different." "Different how?" "I don't know, distracted, like your mind is somewhere else." Evelyn closed her eyes. Her mother had always been able to read her, even over the phone. "There's been a lot going on." "At the office?" "Sort of. Mom, I need to tell you something." "Oh no, you're quitting, aren't you? I knew that job was too demanding, so I'm not quitting, I'm seeing someone." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, "Seeing someone? As in dating?" "Yes." "Who is he? How long has this been going on? Why am I just hearing about this now?" Evelyn took a breath. "His name is Adrian. He's my boss. And it's new. Really new." "Your boss?" Her mother's voice pitched up. "Evelyn Marie Carter, please tell me you're not making a mistake." "I'm not. Mom, he's not what you're thinking. It's complicated, but it's real." Another pause. "Are you happy?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. Was she happy? Terrified, yes. Constantly on edge, absolutely. But underneath all of that, there was something else. Something fierce and bright and entirely hers. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I am." Her mother sighed. "Then I suppose that's what matters. But I want to meet him, soon. And if he hurts you, I don't care how rich or powerful he is. I'll drive to Chicago and handle it myself." Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. "I'll let him know." They talked for a few more minutes, her mother extracting promises to call more often and to bring Adrian to dinner sometime. When Evelyn finally hung up, the apartment felt too quiet, too still. She spent the day trying to distract herself. Packing a bag of her essentials from her apartment, Marcus drove her there and back, silent and watchful. Organizing Adrian's bookshelves, which were in desperate need of a system. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. By the time evening rolled around, her nerves were shot. Adrian called at 7:30. "It's happening in an hour. Are you okay?" Define okay. Fair point. She could hear the tension in his voice, the controlled focus he wore before walking into danger. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If Marcus comes upstairs and tells you to move, you move. No questions, no hesitation. Understood?" Evelyn's chest tightened. "Adrian, what aren't you telling me?" "Just promise me, Evelyn." "I promise." "Good." A pause. "I'll call you when it's over." "Be careful." "Always am." The line went dead. Evelyn set the phone down with shaking hands and resumed her pacing. The apartment felt like a cage now, beautiful and comfortable, but still a cage. The minutes crawled by. 8 o'clock came and went, then 8:30. By 9, Evelyn had worn a path in the hardwood floor. Her phone rang at 9:47. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Hello?" "Miss Carter." The voice was smooth, accented, familiar. "This is Alexei Petrov." Every muscle in Evelyn's body locked. "How did you get this number?" "I make it my business to know things. You should understand that about me." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I wanted to speak with you directly, woman to woman, as it were." "I have nothing to say to you." "Perhaps not. But I have something to say to you." Petrov's tone shifted, losing its false warmth. "Adrian Voss is a dead man. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. The timeline doesn't matter. He's made too many enemies, stretched himself too thin. And when he falls, everyone close to him falls with him. Is that a threat? It's a kindness. I'm giving you the opportunity to walk away while you still can. Leave Chicago, change your name, start over somewhere Adrian's reach doesn't extend." He paused. "Or stay and die with him. Your choice." Evelyn's hand tightened on the phone. You don't know me very well if you think I scare that easily. Oh, I'm not trying to scare you, Miss Carter. I'm trying to save your life. But if you're determined to throw it away on a man who can't protect you, he sighed, theatrical. Well, I suppose some lessons must be learned the hard way. The line went dead. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart hammering. Then she was moving, grabbing her jacket and Adrian's spare phone, heading for the door. Marcus appeared in the hallway before she made it to the elevator. Where do you think you're going? He asked, blocking her path. Petrov just called me. He knows where Adrian is. He's walking into a trap. Marcus's expression hardened. Get back inside. Now. Marcus, this is exactly what Petrov wants. He rattles you, you panic, and Adrian gets distracted worrying about you instead of watching his own back. Marcus grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. The best thing you can do for him right now is trust that he knows what he's doing. And if Petrov's telling the truth, then Adrian has contingencies. He always does. Marcus steered her back toward the apartment. Please, Miss Carter, don't make this harder than it already is. Evelyn wanted to argue, to push past him and do something, anything, instead of standing here helpless. But the look in Marcus's eyes stopped her. He was scared too, hiding it better, but scared nonetheless. She went back inside. The waiting was agony. Evelyn checked her phone every 30 seconds, willing it to ring. She paced. She sat. She paced some more. By 10:30, she'd convinced herself that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Then, finally, her phone buzzed. Adrian's name. She answered before it finished the first ring. Are you okay? I'm fine. His voice was rough, exhausted. It's over. What happened? Not on the phone. I'm coming to you. 20 minutes. He hung up. Evelyn sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. He was alive. That was what mattered. Everything else was just details. When Adrian finally walked through the door, he looked like he'd been through hell. His shirt was torn, blood splattered across the collar. Not his, she hoped. His knuckles were bruised and swelling, but he was breathing, and his eyes found hers the moment he entered. Evelyn crossed the room and threw her arms around him. Adrian caught her, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. I thought, her voice broke. Petrov called me, said you were walking into a trap. Adrian went very still. He called you. He wanted me to leave, said you were going to get me killed. That son of a... Adrian pulled back, his hands framing her face. Are you okay? Did he threaten you? I'm fine. But Adrian, what if he was right? What if this was a trap? It was. Adrian's jaw tightened. But I knew that going in. We planned for it. What happened? He let her go, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar cart. The whiskey disappeared in 2 swallows. Petrov brought twice as many men as we agreed on, had them positioned around the building, ready to move in if things went south. But we had our own people in place. The moment his men made a move, we shut them down. Did anyone die? 3 of his. None of ours, though Marcus took a hit to his vest. He'll have a hell of a bruise tomorrow. Adrian refilled his glass but didn't drink, just stared into the amber liquid. Petrov tried to run, didn't make it far. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Is he dead? No, but he's in no condition to cause problems for a while. Adrian finally looked at her. It's done, Evelyn. The war's over. Just like that? Just like that. Petrov's organization is scattered. Without him, they'll turn on each other trying to fill the power vacuum. By the time they regroup, I'll have fortified every inch of territory he was trying to take. It should have felt like a victory. Should have brought relief. Instead, Evelyn just felt hollow. How many times? She asked quietly. What? How many times are you going to have to do this? Fight off someone trying to take what's yours. Survive another attempt on your life. How many times, Adrian? He set the glass down. I don't know. That's not good enough. It's the only answer I have. Adrian crossed to her, his expression raw. This is the life, Evelyn. There's always another Petrov, another threat, another fight. It doesn't end. Then what's the point? The point is survival, protection, making sure the people who depend on me stay safe. He reached for her hands, lacing their fingers together. The point is that tonight I came home to you, and tomorrow I'll do it again, and the day after that, for as long as I can. Evelyn's eyes burned. That's not enough. I know, but it's all I've got. She pulled away, needing space to think. Petrov said something else. He said you're stretched too thin, that you've made too many enemies. He's not wrong. So change it, consolidate, pull back from the edges, and fortify what matters. Adrian laughed, sharp and bitter. You make it sound so simple. Isn't it? No, because every inch I give up is an inch someone else takes. Every alliance I break creates a new enemy. This empire, it only exists because I hold every piece together through sheer force of will. The moment I show weakness, the whole thing collapses. Then maybe it should. The words landed like a bomb. Adrian stared at her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. What did you just say? You heard me. Evelyn lifted her chin, refusing to back down. Maybe this empire you've built isn't worth what it's costing you, what it's costing everyone around you. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I've seen what this does to you, Adrian. The constant vigilance, the paranoia, the way you can't let your guard down for even a second. That's not living. That's surviving. And there's a difference. And what would you have me do? Walk away? Abandon everyone who depends on me? I'm saying there has to be a middle ground, a way to protect people without destroying yourself in the process. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. You've been in this world for a week, and you think you understand it better than I do? I think you're so buried in it you can't see a way out anymore. Evelyn's voice cracked. I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's another way. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then he turned and walked to the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. My father built this empire, he said quietly. Spent 30 years clawing his way up from nothing. He taught me that in this world you're either predator or prey. There's no middle ground. Your father was wrong. Was he? Adrian turned to face her. Because everything I have, everything I've built, it's because I followed his rules. I made the hard choices. I did the things that needed to be done, no matter the cost. And look where it's gotten you. Alone, exhausted, fighting a war that never ends. I'm not alone anymore. The words hung between them. Evelyn's breath caught. You asked me yesterday if I loved you, Adrian continued, his voice rough. I said I was trying not to, but the truth is I failed. I love you, Evelyn, and that terrifies me more than any enemy ever could. Evelyn's chest constricted. Why? Because love is a weakness. It's leverage. It's a knife someone can use to cut me open. Adrian crossed to her, his movement slow and deliberate. But standing here, looking at you, I don't care. Let them use it. Let them try. As long as I get to keep you. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. Then keep me. But not by building higher walls, not by fighting harder. Keep me by letting me in. All the way in. Let me help you carry this. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. And I'm asking anyway. Adrian's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation. He wouldn't find any. Evelyn had made her choice. Now she needed him to make his. If I do this, he said slowly, if I let you into every part of my world, the brutal parts, the ugly parts, the decisions that keep me up at night, you don't get to look away. You don't get to pretend it's not happening. I won't. And if I ask you to do something you don't agree with, then I'll tell you, and we'll figure it out together. Adrian exhaled shakily. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. You're either the best thing that's ever happened to me or the worst mistake I've ever made. Probably both. He laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised out of him. Yeah, probably. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of the apartment. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the shift happening in this room. When Adrian finally pulled back, something had changed in his expression. The walls were still there, but they'd cracked, just enough to let her through. I need to show you something, he said. He led her to his office, a room she'd only glimpsed in passing. Inside, he pulled a leather-bound ledger from a locked drawer and set it on the desk. This is everything, he said. Every account, every operation, every person on my payroll. I keep it offline, off the books. Only 3 people know it exists. Me, Marcus, and Irina. Evelyn stared at the ledger. Why are you showing me this? Because you asked me to let you in. This is me letting you in. Adrian opened the ledger, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting. You want to help me find a middle ground? Start here. Look at what I have, what I'm protecting, and tell me where I can pull back without it all falling apart. It was a test. Evelyn recognized that, but it was also trust, the kind of trust Adrian didn't give easily. She pulled up a chair and started reading. The numbers were staggering. The scope of Adrian's operation was even larger than she'd imagined, but as she worked through the pages, patterns emerged. Redundancies, operations that overlapped, territories held more for pride than profit. Here, she said, pointing to a section, this distribution network on the west side, you're barely breaking even after paying for security. Why keep it? It was my father's first territory, symbolic. Symbols don't keep people safe. What if you consolidated with this network? She flipped pages. The one in Pilsen combined logistics, reduced overhead, and used the savings to increase security where you actually need it. Adrian leaned over her shoulder, studying the numbers. That could work. And this partnership with the Castellano family in Milwaukee, you're giving them favorable terms in exchange for what? Goodwill? They helped me when I was starting out. Sentiment is expensive. Evelyn met his eyes. I'm not saying cut them off, I'm saying renegotiate. Fair terms, not favorable ones. If they're real allies, they'll understand. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then, keep going. They worked through the night, Evelyn asking questions and Adrian answering with a candor that surprised her. By the time dawn started lightening the sky, they'd identified a dozen places where Adrian could streamline operations, reduce risk, and still maintain the protection his people needed. This is good, Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. Really good. Why didn't I see this before? Because you were too close to it. Sometimes you need fresh eyes. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. I meant what I said earlier. I love you. Evelyn's heart swelled. I love you too. Even knowing what you know, what I've done? Even then. Adrian pulled her into his lap, and she went willingly, curling against his chest. They sat like that as the sun rose over Chicago, two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos and decided to build something new. So what happens now? Evelyn asked. Now? Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. Now we make it official. Official how? However you want. Move in with me. Let me introduce you as my partner, not just my assistant. Show the world that you're mine and I'm yours. That's a lot of declaration for someone who is trying not to fall in love with me. Yeah, well, I've always been bad at following my own advice. Evelyn laughed, the sound bright in the quiet morning. Okay, let's do it. All of it. You're sure? Stop asking me that. I'm sure. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Then we start today. New operation structure, new security protocols. And you by my side through all of it. Partners? Partners. It was a beginning. Not the neat, tidy kind that tied everything up with a bow, but the messy, complicated kind that felt real, that felt earned. As the city woke up around them, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The first week of their new arrangement passed in a blur of logistics and adjustments that felt simultaneously monumental and surprisingly ordinary. Evelyn moved her things into Adrian's apartment in stages, books first, then clothes, then the small collection of framed photographs that made any space feel like home. Her mother called 3 times to ask if she was being reckless, and each time Evelyn answered with the same unwavering certainty. She knew what she was doing. The truth was more complicated than that. She didn't know, not entirely, but she was learning. Learning the rhythm of Adrian's world, the unspoken rules that governed his empire, the delicate balance between strength and restraint that kept everything from collapsing. Marcus had raised an eyebrow when Adrian announced the changes at their morning briefing, but he hadn't argued. Irina had been more direct. You're putting a lot of faith in someone who was pouring your coffee 2 weeks ago, she'd said, her scarred face impassive. I'm putting faith in someone who sees solutions I've been too stubborn to consider, Adrian had replied. And if you've got a problem with that, now's the time to say it. Irina had studied Evelyn for a long moment, then shrugged. Your empire, your funeral. Just don't expect me to clean up the mess if this goes sideways. But it hadn't gone sideways. The consolidation plan Evelyn had outlined worked even better than she'd anticipated. Adrian pulled back from 3 marginal territories, redistributed his security forces to areas that actually needed protection, and renegotiated terms with half a dozen partners who'd been coasting on old favors. The pushback was minimal. Most people seemed relieved to deal with clearer boundaries and more straightforward terms. Within 2 weeks, the operation ran smoother than it had in years. Evelyn spent her days learning the business from the inside. She sat in on meetings, asked questions that made people uncomfortable, and slowly earned the respect of Adrian's inner circle through sheer competence. The corporate assistant skills that had seemed so mundane before translated surprisingly well to managing a criminal empire. Both required organization, discretion, and the ability to anticipate problems before they materialized. Her nights belonged to Adrian. They'd fall into bed exhausted, talk until their words blurred together, and wake up tangled in each other like they were afraid separation might break the spell. He told her about Elena in pieces, small memories that surfaced at odd moments. She told him about her own ghosts, the reason she'd built walls so high, even she'd forgotten what they were protecting. It should have been perfect, or at least close to it, but 3 weeks after Petrov's failed ambush, the cracks started showing. It began with small things. Adrian working later, coming home tense and distant, conversations that used to flow easily now punctuated by silences that stretched too long. Evelyn would catch him staring at nothing, his mind clearly somewhere else. And when she asked what was wrong, he'd just shake his head and say everything was fine. Everything wasn't fine. She finally confronted him on a Thursday night. Adrian had come home at midnight, moved through the apartment like a ghost, and poured himself a drink without saying a word. Evelyn watched him from the bedroom doorway, her patience finally snapping. "Talk to me," she said. Adrian didn't turn around. "Nothing to talk about." "That's a lie." "Evelyn, don't." She crossed the room, positioning herself between him and the window. "Don't shut me out. Not after everything." Adrian's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd walk away, retreat behind those walls he'd worked so hard to lower. Then something in his shoulders sagged. "I'm losing control," he said quietly. "Of what?" "Everything. The consolidation? It was the right move, I know that. But it made me look weak. People are testing boundaries again. Small things, but they add up." He set the glass down, his hands bracing against the window ledge. "And I keep thinking about what you said, about this empire costing too much, and wondering if you were right." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Adrian, I built this to protect people, to make sure what happened to Elena never happened to anyone else. But how many people have died because of decisions I made? How many families destroyed because I chose power over peace?" He turned to look at her, and the anguish in his eyes was devastating. "Maybe I'm not protecting anyone. Maybe I'm just perpetuating the violence." She'd never seen him like this. Vulnerable, yes. Exhausted, certainly. But not this. Not questioning the very foundation of everything he'd built. "You want to know what I think?" Evelyn said carefully. "Always. I think you're so busy trying to be perfect that you've forgotten how to be human." She stepped closer. "The consolidation made you look weak to people who only understand strength, but it made you look smart to everyone else. And the people who matter, your people, they're safer now than they've been in years. That doesn't erase what I've done. No. But it's a start." Evelyn reached for his hands. "You asked me once if I could see all of you and not run. The answer is yes. Even the parts that scare you, even the mistakes. But you have to let me help carry it, Adrian. You can't do this alone anymore." His fingers tightened around hers. "I don't know how to let go." "Then learn. We'll figure it out together." Adrian pulled her against him, his face buried in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, the city lights painting shadows across the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I want to marry you." Evelyn's breath caught. She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. Found none. "That's... Adrian, we've barely been together a month. I know. And I know it's fast. But I've spent my entire adult life making calculated decisions, weighing risks, planning 3 moves ahead. And for once, I want to do something reckless. Something that's just for me." His hands framed her face. "I want to marry you, Evelyn. Not because it makes strategic sense or provides protection or any of the reasons that would justify it. I want to marry you because I love you, and because life is too short to waste time pretending I don't. Evelyn's eyes burned. This was insane, reckless, the kind of decision she would have talked herself out of a month ago. But standing here, looking at the man who'd torn down every wall she'd built and shown her what it meant to be truly seen, "Yes," she said. Adrian's eyes widened. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you, but on one condition." "Name it." "We do it our way. No big ceremony, no political alliances disguised as a wedding, just us and the people who actually matter." A smile broke across Adrian's face, genuine and unguarded, and so beautiful it made her chest ache. "Deal." He kissed her then, deep and consuming, and Evelyn kissed him back with everything she had. They made love slowly, urgently, like they were sealing a promise neither of them fully understood yet. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. A sense of rightness that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with trust. The next morning, Adrian announced it to his inner circle over breakfast at the warehouse. Marcus choked on his coffee. Irina actually laughed, a sharp, surprised sound. "You're serious," Irina said. "Completely. How long have you two even been together?" "Long enough." Adrian's hand found Evelyn's under the table. "We're doing this. Small ceremony next week. Just family. I'd like you both there." Marcus recovered first. "If you're happy, boss, then congratulations. But we need to talk about security protocols." "Already handled," Adrian interrupted. "Private location. Limited guest list. No advance notice to anyone outside this room." "And what happens when people find out?" Irina asked. "Because they will. And they're going to see it as exactly what it is, you making her untouchable. That's the point." Adrian's voice was firm. "Evelyn is part of this now. Anyone who wants to get to me has to go through her, and I'm making it crystal clear that won't end well for them." Evelyn squeezed his hand, grateful and terrified in equal measure. This was protection, yes. But it was also a target. The moment Adrian made her his wife, she became leverage. A weakness his enemies could exploit. But when she looked at him, saw the fierce determination in his eyes, the absolute certainty that he would burn down anyone who tried to hurt her, she believed him. They spent the next week planning in secret. Rosa helped Evelyn find a dress, simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate gown her mother would have chosen. Adrian secured a venue through a friend who owed him favors, a small chapel on the edge of the city that had seen better days but still held a worn kind of beauty. The guest list was smaller than small. Marcus and Irina. Dev, the tech specialist who'd helped coordinate their security. Rosa, who cried when Adrian asked her to stand in for the family he'd lost. And at the last minute, Evelyn called her mother. The conversation was predictably difficult. "Married?" her mother had shrieked. "Evelyn, you've known this man for a month. 5 weeks, actually. That's not better. What about your job, your apartment, your entire life?" "My life is here now, Mom. With him." "And what happens when it doesn't work out? When you realize you've made a terrible mistake?" Evelyn had taken a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Then I'll deal with it. But I'm doing this, with or without your blessing." The silence on the other end had been painful. Then quietly, "Do you love him?" "More than I thought I could love anyone." Another pause. "Then I suppose I'm coming to Chicago. Someone needs to make sure you're not completely losing your mind." Her mother arrived 2 days before the wedding, took one look at Adrian, and proceeded to interrogate him over dinner with the efficiency of a prosecutor. Adrian handled it with surprising grace, answering her questions honestly, within reason, and earning grudging respect by the end of the evening. "He's trouble," her mother told Evelyn later when they were alone. "But he looks at you like you hung the moon, so I suppose that counts for something. High praise coming from you." "Don't get used to it." But her mother hugged her anyway, fierce and quick. "Be happy, baby, and call me when things get hard, because they will." The day of the wedding dawned cold and clear. Evelyn woke alone. Adrian had insisted on spending the night at the warehouse, some outdated notion about not seeing the bride before the ceremony. She'd rolled her eyes but let him go, secretly touched by the gesture. Rosa arrived at noon to help her get ready, bringing flowers and champagne and a smile that reminded Evelyn so much of what Elena might have been like it hurt. He's nervous, Rosa said, adjusting Evelyn's veil. I've never seen Adrian nervous. It's almost sweet. Almost? Well, he's still Adrian. He spent the morning triple-checking security protocols and threatening Marcus with bodily harm if anything went wrong. Evelyn laughed despite herself. That sounds about right. The chapel was perfect, small and intimate, with afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows that painted the walls in shades of gold and blue. Adrian stood at the altar in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made for this moment, his eyes finding hers the moment she entered. Evelyn walked down the aisle alone, her mother watching from the front pew with tears streaming down her face. When she reached Adrian, he took her hands, and she could feel them trembling slightly. You look... His voice caught. You look beautiful. So do you. The ceremony was short. Simple vows that they'd written themselves, promises to be honest and imperfect and present through whatever came next. When the officiant pronounced them married, Adrian kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The reception was held in the chapel's small hall, wine and food and the kind of easy laughter that came from people who'd earned the right to celebrate. Evelyn's mother cornered Marcus at one point, demanding to know exactly what security measures were in place to keep her daughter safe. Dev showed Rosa photos of the new computer lab they'd installed at the community center. Irina stood in the corner nursing a glass of vodka, watching everything with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. And Adrian never left Evelyn's side, his hand at the small of her back, his attention fixed on her like she was the only thing that mattered. When they finally left, Marcus driving them to a hotel Adrian had booked under a false name, Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years. She'd made a choice, a reckless, illogical, completely terrifying choice, and somehow it felt like the first real decision she'd made in her entire life. The honeymoon was 3 days at a cabin upstate, away from the city and the business and the constant weight of responsibility. They spent it talking and not talking, making love and making plans, existing in a bubble where the outside world couldn't touch them. On the last night, lying in bed with Adrian's arm draped across her waist, Evelyn finally asked the question that had been building since that first week. Do you think we're going to make it? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Always. I don't know. The odds aren't great. We're building something in the middle of a world designed to tear people apart. And there are going to be days when you hate me for dragging you into this. Probably. But I think... He shifted to look at her properly. I think if we're honest with each other, if we don't try to be perfect, if we remember that we're on the same side even when we disagree, I think we have a shot. Evelyn traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. That's not very romantic. You want romance, I'll give you romance. You're the love of my life, and I'd burn down the world for you and all that. Much better. Adrian smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I mean it, though. Every word. I know. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Evelyn woke the next morning, she felt ready. Ready to go back to Chicago, to step into the life they were building together, to face whatever came next. The return to reality was jarring, but manageable. Word of their marriage had spread. Impossible to keep something like that quiet for long. The reactions ranged from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. A few of Adrian's business associates sent gifts with barely concealed mockery. Others reached out with genuine congratulations, recognizing that Evelyn brought something to the table Adrian had been missing. The consolidation continued. Adrian restructured 3 more operations, cutting loose partnerships that had become liabilities and strengthening the ones that mattered. Evelyn worked beside him, her input becoming as valued as Irina's or Marcus's. She learned to read the room, to identify when someone was lying, to understand the language of power that governed every interaction. It wasn't easy. There were days when the violence of Adrian's world felt like too much, when she'd see something that made her question every choice that brought her here. Days when Adrian's walls went back up and she had to fight to tear them down again. Days when they fought, screaming matches that ended with both of them exhausted and raw and somehow more honest than before. But there were also moments of surprising grace. Walking into the community center and seeing kids' faces light up because the programs Adrian funded had given them a future. Watching Adrian negotiate a truce that prevented bloodshed instead of causing it. Lying in bed at 3 a.m. while he talked about his fears and failures, trusting her to hold them without judgment. 3 months after the wedding, Evelyn got a call from her former colleague at Voss Industries. The woman was leaving, she said, and they needed someone to fill the position. Did Evelyn know anyone? I might, Evelyn said carefully. What are the requirements? Someone who's organized, discreet, and doesn't ask too many questions when Mr. Voss has mysterious meetings. Evelyn almost laughed. I'll see what I can do. She mentioned it to Adrian that night over dinner, takeout from the terrible diner he still insisted had the best terrible coffee in Chicago. You could go back, he said quietly. If you wanted, take the position. Have something that's yours. I have plenty that's mine. You know what I mean, a career outside of this. Outside of me. Evelyn set down her fork. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy. And if that means keeping one foot in the legitimate world, Adrian? She waited until he looked at her. I'm exactly where I want to be. This life we're building, it's messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying. But it's ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Relief flickered across his face. You're sure? How many times are you going to ask me that? Until I believe it. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Then believe it now. I chose you. I keep choosing you. Every single day. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. I love you. I love you too. Even when you're impossible. Especially when I'm impossible. 6 months in, the landscape shifted again. One of Petrov's former lieutenants reached out, requesting a meeting. Adrian was skeptical, but Evelyn convinced him to hear the man out. The meeting revealed that Petrov's organization had indeed imploded, and the surviving members were looking for someone to bring order to the chaos. I don't want your territory, Adrian told the man, a wiry fighter named Victor with eyes that had seen too much. I want stability. Then help us establish it. Be the mediator. We'll pay for the privilege. Adrian looked at Evelyn. She gave a small nod. Fine, Adrian said, but on my terms. No bloodshed. Clean transfers of power. And if anyone violates the agreement, they answer to me. Victor agreed. Within a month, Adrian had brokered peace between 4 warring factions and established himself not as a conqueror, but as a broker of order. It was a new role, one that required different skills than the ones his father had taught him. But it worked. The violence didn't stop completely. It never would, not in this world. But it decreased, became more targeted, less likely to catch innocents in the crossfire. Rosa called it a miracle. Irina called it lucky. Marcus just shook his head and said Adrian had gotten soft. Maybe I have, Adrian said later, alone with Evelyn in his office. But I'm okay with that. Good, because soft looks good on you. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in the curve of her neck. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to fall apart. It might, someday, but not today. No, not today. A year after that first conversation in his office, Evelyn stood in the same community center where Rosa had hugged her and told her to keep Adrian alive. They were dedicating a new wing, a library and computer lab funded entirely by Adrian's restructured operations. The kids who would use it had no idea where the money came from, and that was exactly how it should be. Adrian gave a short speech, his words simple and heartfelt. When it was over, a little girl approached him shyly, holding out a drawing she'd made, a crude but enthusiastic sketch of a superhero. Is this for me? Adrian asked, crouching down to her level. The girl nodded. My teacher says you help people, so I made you this. Adrian's throat worked. He took the drawing carefully, like it was made of glass. Thank you. I'll keep it forever. The girl beamed and ran back to her class. Adrian stood slowly, staring at the paper in his hands. Evelyn slipped her hand into his. You okay? Yeah. His voice was rough. Better than okay. They left together, Marcus trailing behind at a respectful distance. In the car, Adrian unfolded the drawing again, smoothing out the creases. Elena would have loved this, he said quietly. I think she would have loved what you've built. All of it. Even the parts that aren't exactly legal, especially those parts, because they're keeping people safe. Adrian looked at her, and the weight in his eyes had lifted. Not completely. It would never be completely gone, but enough that he could breathe, enough that he could live. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing me, for staying, for making me believe I could be something other than what my father taught me to be. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. You're welcome, but you did the hard part. I just reminded you it was possible. They drove home through the city they'd both come to love. Evelyn for its resilience, Adrian for its endless capacity for reinvention. The apartment waited for them, warm and familiar, filled with the life they'd built together, one difficult choice at a time. That night, curled up on the couch with wine and takeout, and the comfortable silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words, Adrian pulled out his phone. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous. About stepping back. Not from everything, but from the day-to-day. Letting Marcus and Irina handle more of the operations while I focus on the bigger picture. Evelyn set down her wine glass. What brought this on? That little girl today. And the fact that I want to be around to see what happens to her. To see the community center thriving 10 years from now. 20. He looked at her. I want a future, Evelyn. Not just survival. And I can't have that if I'm constantly fighting to hold on to everything with both hands. So let go. Just like that. Just like that. She took his hand. You've spent your whole life proving you're strong enough to carry it all. Maybe it's time to prove you're strong enough to share the weight. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, let's do it. The transition took months. Adrian promoted Marcus to operational director, gave Irina control over 3 territories she'd been managing in all but name, and slowly, deliberately, stepped back from the front lines. He kept the strategic decisions, the big picture planning, the role of mediator and peacekeeper he'd carved out after Petrov's fall. But he stopped carrying everything alone. The change in him was gradual but undeniable. He smiled more, slept better, started talking about plans that extended beyond the next crisis. He and Evelyn took weekends away, little escapes that reminded them there was a world beyond empires and territories and the constant calculation of risk. 2 years after they married, on a quiet Sunday morning in the apartment they'd made home, Adrian woke Evelyn with coffee and a question. Do you ever regret it? Evelyn took the coffee, blinking sleep from her eyes. Regret what? Choosing this. Me. All of it. She sat up, studying him in the morning light. He looked younger now than he had when she first met him. The weight of isolation finally lifted, the walls finally down. No, she said simply. Not once. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, because that's when I remember why we chose each other in the first place. She set the coffee aside and pulled him close. We're not perfect, Adrian. We never will be, but we're real, and that's enough. He kissed her, slow and sweet. I love you. I love you too. They stayed in bed until noon, talking about nothing and everything, about the community center's expansion plans, about Marcus's engagement to a woman none of them had seen coming, about the garden Evelyn wanted to plant on the apartment's roof, about the future they were building, one imperfect choice at a time. Because that was the thing about love in a world built on power and violence and impossible odds. It didn't erase the darkness, didn't make the choices easier or the stakes lower, but it gave you a reason to keep fighting, to keep building, to keep believing that maybe, just maybe, you could carve out something good in the middle of all the chaos. And for Evelyn Carter Voss, standing on the rooftop of their building watching the sun set over Chicago, with her husband's arms wrapped around her, that was more than enough. It was everything.